What's going on, guys? This is Eric with hustlepaintball.com, and this is the online manual for the Bob Long Insight NG. If you were looking for an efficiency test or our general, overview of what we think of the gun, check out our review on this gun on our YouTube page. And as far as if you were looking for just the the reg portion, how to maintain it, or the bolt section, how to maintain that, if you go down to the description below, there's going to be a link with some timestamps in there. You can go right to that portion if you just want to skip forward all through this this mumbo jumbo. Real quick though, a couple tools that you will need. You will need a 1/16 Allen key, a 5/64 Allen key, a 1/8 Allen key, and a 5/32 Allen key. Q-tips, some Tri-Flow, or in this case, our Planet Eclipse oil. And normally, we would use Pathogen Super Grease, but just so you guys can actually see how much grease I'm actually putting on the O-rings and, and where I'm putting it, we're going to be using some Planet Eclipse grease. It's white. And a number 1 Phillips screwdriver. So, and of course, towel or microfiber. So, let's get to it. All right, so let's go over some of the general information on your Insight NG. In order to chrono this, there's a screw on the bottom side of your reg here. It's 1/8 Allen key. Now, in order to increase your feet per second, you want to go clockwise, which will increase your pressure. And to decrease your pressure or decrease your feet per second, you want to go counterclockwise. Unlike other markers out there, a full turn would give you about, roughly 30 feet per second changes. On the Bob Long Insight, the NG, it only takes about an eighth or a quarter to actually see those changes. So you really don't have to do much to chrono these things. Now, the operating pressure does like to operate around 160 to 180 psi, and Bob Long does offer a pressure tester, but it's additional. So moving on to the ASA here, as you can see, it's in the off position, which isn't aligned with the ASA. To air up your marker, if you had a tank on it, I don't know if you guys heard that, powers up, or it clicks into place. If you had a tank on there, you'd hear the gun air up, a little shoop noise. To degas your marker, you want to go counterclockwise, and obviously it doesn't look right, and of course it would purge the gun. So now moving on into inlet pressure. These Insight NGs, they like to operate between 250 to 550 psi. If you have a standard marker or a standard tank, would you not see nearly as good of numbers as if you were to use a 250 to 500 psi regulator or 550 psi regulator? No, you probably wouldn't. But the optimal range is 250 to 550. If you want to go check out our efficiency test, we got roughly the same numbers. I mean, there were some changes between the cases of paint that we shot, so that gave us, the numbers did vary, but that's the optimal range you want to be in, 250 to 550. Now, moving on to powering up your gun, on the back here is a small black button. You want to hold it for at least a second. Powers up. On the very top up here, that is the eye indicator, or the breach indicator. So as you can see, the block went solid, which means there's a ball in the breech. Now, in order to power off your gun, you want to hold the black button. 3, 2, 1, off. The gun is now off. So let's power this back up real quick, and I'll show you how to turn off the eyes. Now, this gun does have a force shot. So if I had a gun, or if I had a tank on, or screwed in the ASA, and the gun was actually aired up, if I pulled the trigger, after a second, it would force fire. I'm not sure if you saw the screen blink real quick there, but that was it doing its force shot. Now, if I were to pull the trigger and hold it past that force shot, on the top up here, you'll see the eyes turn off. So now I can cycle the gun without the eyes on. So in order to turn the eyes back on, I would hold on the trigger, it would go through its force shot, and now the eyes are back on. And you can see on the very top right there, it's a solid black square, meaning a ball's in the breech. Pull my finger out, and it's now a black square, or a hollow square, meaning that there's no gun, or there's no ball in the breech. So go ahead and power this off. And that is the general information. Regulator maintenance. So there's a few things I want to go over with this regulator with you. Some pretty neat features. Now you see how I just took apart the bottom side of the regulator with my hands? Some of you may run into the problem where you go lefty-loosey and the very top will actually come down with it. What I want you to do is just tighten that back up, cinch it up against the body, and then hold the very top piece and then get the bottom piece off. It's not crucial, but sometimes they do want to come off together. Now, if you can see on the inside of the regulator right here, you've got a piston. Either you can tap it out in your hand and it'll eventually just fly out, or you can get some needle nose pliers, grab that bad mamma jamma like so. Now, the rest of the pieces you would want to tap out. Now below the piston right here actually sits the shims. There's no reason to take the O-ring off and adjust with these adjust the shims or take them off to clean them or anything like that. They really don't get dirty, period. The main thing that you want to look for is the O-ring on this piston right here. It does require grease, some Dow 33. So what I'm going to do is clean this off for you. Take some grease. I'm going to put a small bit on my finger right here. Actually, that's kind of a large bit, but you'll want to take your finger and just kind of spin the piston around on some grease. And you basically just want to have enough grease on either side of the piston and take any excess off. And that's pretty much it. What you'll do is you'll take the bottom side. Also, the adjuster does not have to come out at all. There's really no reason to take it out, but if you want to, you can. It doesn't matter. Take your valve stack, drop it in there, make sure it's at the very bottom. Now what I like to do, I like to take the piston, and as soon as it starts seating in, see how the top's kind of sticking out right there? And this is why. Because when you go to put this back on, I can only see that this Schrader valve right here, if it doesn't go inside the very top of the piston, it could possibly bend or break or whatever. So I just like to visually make sure that the Schrader valve goes inside the piston, and then I push it inside, and then I tighten it up. And just to show you real quick, cool thing about the Schrader valve is that you can test it with an air source with the body off. It's kind of weird. It kind of freaked me out at first, but if you were to air up the gun, if it's not hissing or blowing air out here, you know the Schrader valve is good. So that's pretty neat. It's pretty neat. But just in case if you wanted to remove the Schrader valve, you just grab needle nose pliers or your fingers, lefty-loosey, and it'll come right out. It's got a nice spring tension. There is some grease in there. It's not crucial. Go ahead and throw that back in. Everything's all slippery. All right. Now that you got that thing back in there, put the lower portion back on. Now, let me see if I can get this top portion off for you so you guys can actually see what's above it. There's this one O-ring. There's really no reason to take this off other than to replace it if it's leaking. On the very top right here, you just want to take a little bit of grease. Oh. Put it around the edge right there, and that's it. There's really no purpose to do this, but just so you guys know, there is an O-ring up there. Sometimes, you know, if it breaks or if the O-ring falls apart over the years, that's how you take it apart. To service your eyes, you're going to need your Allen key, your 5/64 Allen key. You want to be on a flat surface. Now, if you're at the field, bring a tech mat. There's some small parts in here that are really easy to lose, and to lose them on the ground, chances are you're never going to find them again. So take your Allen key, remove this screw. Now, flip over the gun. It's the easiest way to get the eye cover out. And I got lucky, and the actual detent spring is still on the back side of the detent. This is very easy to lose, like extremely easy to lose. I lost one on this carpet, on the floor, a couple minutes ago. So set aside that spring, go through the breech, lift up on the detent. They just kind of chill in there. Now grab your number 1 screwdriver, and there's a Phillips head right here. I'm going to go ahead and remove that. Again, don't lose this. Now lift up on the eye board and disconnect it very gently. Now this guy. At this point in time, take your rag, wipe it clean, or if you used grease on your bolt, chances are grease will be all caked up on here. Go to the bolt section. I clearly state that either use Triflow or any lightweight oil on the actual red bolt itself. If you use grease, it'll actually cover the eye boards or cover the port where the eyes actually see each other, and you will run into some problems. So to reconnect this, it's easier to connect it and then set it down in there, unless you got small midget fingers. Take your Phillips screw, snug it down tight. It's not going to go anywhere. There's still an eye plate behind it. Drop your detent in. Again, don't lose your detent spring. Drop that guy in there. Go ahead and put on your eye cover. Now here's a good way to see if your spring is still there with the screw out. You'll actually be able to spring this up and down, so you know that the spring is actually in its home. Go ahead and cinch that down. Repeat these steps on the other side, and you're pretty much golden. If you're at the field, take out the bolt. You can actually run your swab through the breech down to the feed neck. If you don't want to take this apart, I would strongly recommend not taking these apart at the field or taking off the eye covers at the field unless you have a tech mat or a clean surface or a towel to work on. So that is the eye maintenance. To remove your trigger, or if you got in the situation where you got shot in the trigger and your micro switch isn't activating, there's a quick removal screw right chaw. See that, guys? Now I'm going to go ahead and remove that for you so I can show you guys. My only complaint about this, even though it's really cool, it's really awesome, it makes your life easier, especially if you did get shot in the trigger, you don't have to take your entire gun apart. The only gripe that I have with this is that when you go to remove this, there's obviously a spring return. And as you can already see, it's getting caught. Now what that's getting caught on is the micro switch. Whoop. And that's exactly why I don't like that. Now, when you're removing this, it basically sits right above the micro switch, or the spring does. So when you have to drop the trigger down in order to get it out of the trigger frame, the spring gets caught on it, and then it pulls it out, and then it usually goes boing across somewhere, anywhere. it's commonly, a lot of people have been removing the spring, keeping it out. But for the sake of this video, since I know some of you guys are going to be keeping it in your gun, I'll do the same thing. So in order to get the spring back in, it has a little hole, a little home right here. So you start one side, use your fingernail, kind of press it in. So it's actually in the trigger, like so, right? Cool. Easy enough. Now, this is something that I noticed. You see these trigger frame screws, or the grip frame screws, I'm sorry, on both sides? Go ahead and remove those. And what that'll do is it'll make it really easy to see the spring above the micro switch when you go to reinstall it. And hopefully I can get it on camera using this guy right over here. Okay. So when you're putting this back in, I'll try not to get inside the frame with my giant noggin here. Now, what you're going to have to do is start with the back side. This is going to take some practice, and even then, I am not the best at it. So you just kind of have to start the spring inwards, and then get the very top of the trigger in, and then push it back so that the very front of the trigger actually sits inside the milling of the grip frame. Now here's the tricky part that I was trying to see if I can get on camera right here. With these grip screws taken out, you can actually take your Allen key and you can press up on the spring to get it off of the micro switch. Let's see if I did it here. Cool. So with the ball bearings on the trigger lined up with the hole for the pin, let's go ahead and drop the pin in for right now. You can stick your Allen key in there and you can take the spring and push it up off of the micro switch. And then when you do it correctly, you'll be able to see right straight through those grip frame screws. If not, you'll see the very top of the spring actually catching on the micro switch. And even when you're pulling the trigger and you set your board filters, your debounce filters to the maximum, that spring will cause any type of vibration against the micro switch, and it'll essentially be a runaway gun, or if it's real steel, it's called a runaway gun, where you go to, especially on ramping or semi, if you start shooting your gun, it won't stop shooting the gun until you physically hold the trigger forward. So we learned that the hard way. Fortunately, nobody got hurt, or nobody got shot, but it was still scary nonetheless. So go ahead and tighten down your trigger screw, and go ahead and throw on your grip frame, or your grip screws. Now, like I said earlier, a lot of people have been taking out those springs, not running any springs at all. Some people have been finding springs at a hardware store or lighter springs, and they throw those in there. As long as, it's all personal preference. It's not necessarily better. It's not necessarily, worse to take that spring out, but it's all up to you. Just as long as you make sure that your filters are set correctly, so that the gun doesn't run away from you and your gun is still actually safe. Bolt maintenance is pretty straightforward. Make sure that your gun's not aired up. On the top of the inside right here is a button. Push it down, pull the whole bolt assembly out the back. First things first, we're going to unscrew the can and give it a little tug right there. Now on the back side of the can, there is an O-ring that likes to fall off. Might as well just take that off right now. Grab your 1/8 Allen key. Oh, and normally you would take your needle nose pliers, stick it on the very inside of the bolt, like so, and spread them out so it actually holds it tight. Ours, you just grab a rag, unscrews. Keep in mind, this is clean. Everything on this bolt assembly is clean. If you were to be taking it apart right now, of course you'd be wanting to wipe all the excess grease or dirty grease or dirt off as you're going. This is the shutoff valve. Go ahead and slide that guy off, the very tip. Now, on the back side of it, on the inside of the shutoff valve, there's 2 O-rings on either side. On the front side right here, and on the back side. I'll show you how to grease those right now. So grab your Q-tip and some of your grease. Put some on the Q-tip. And then you'll just take your Q-tip here and just start packing it in. Now, with this, you don't have to be scared to put too much in there, because on the shaft that the bolt screws into, or onto, there's an O-ring. This will actually collect majority of all the excess grease. So when you go to slide this over, like so, you can see how it picked up a lot of the extra grease. All right, so now take some more grease. Put some on the back part of the shaft right here, where the shutoff valve rides. And then if there's any excess towards the bumper stop, go ahead and take that off. See, that's nice and healthy. Go ahead and slide your can back over. Grab your bolt. You're going to want to put some grease on the skirt of it, just towards the top. Now take, oops, I guess I skipped a step there. Take your can and put some grease on the flapper valve, or the flapper O-ring at the very tip of the can. Again, if you want to use your Q-tip, you can. Just kind of smudge it all around inside there. Start putting this thing back together. Thread the front back on, or the front back on. Use your 1/8 Allen key. And again, if you have to use your needleless pliers, you can do it again. Doesn't have to be super tight. Doesn't have to be He-Man'd on or anything. But as soon as everything's back together, you can slide the can back and forth on the O-ring, or on the bolt, I'm sorry. And you can see where the O-ring is actually picking up and moving all the excess grease. So I'll go ahead and take that off. Now, take your shutoff valve on the back right here. Grab some grease. Now on the shutoff valve, you want to put some grease on the very edge of the valve here, because there is an O-ring on the inside of the can where this lives. And it's got to be right there, so it's nice and happy. Now, go ahead and put some grease on the 2 sail O-rings on the bolt, right here. The reason you do this last is because, well, you're hanging onto this portion of the bolt majority of the time. You're cleaning everything. Nice even coat of grease everywhere on both O-rings. Take your back cap. On the inside of the back cap, let's see if I can use a Q-tip so you guys can see here. On the inside of the back cap, there is a O-ring right here. And this O-ring, it's really easy to do, and really easy to grease. You can actually use your finger to apply most of the grease on it. You just want to do little pinches around on the inside. And if you have fat fingers like me, use your Q-tip. Spread that around evenly inside there. Pretty straightforward stuff. It's not rocket science. Just make sure all the O-rings are nice and happy with some grease. And then slide it back together. Don't forget the O-ring that's probably fallen off by now if you haven't taken it off. You can just slide it over the whole entire engine to put it back on. And that's pretty much it, guys. I mean, that's the majority of the service that you're going to be using on your bolt, or going to be doing on your bolt. Now, take your lightweight oil of your choice, apply it to the tip here, first O-ring on the front of the bolt, one on the rear. Smudge that around. Now the reason why you don't use grease here is because the grease can actually get plugged, or it can get backed up into where the eye port is. Cause you to have some eye problems depending on what grease you're using. So you can actually take some of the excess grease or excess oil that's on your fingers, spread it around on the O-rings on the bolt or on the outside of the body, so it makes it easier to slide in. Now, this guy right here, you guys are probably wondering what's underneath these. It's just a 011 O-ring on the very underneath this cap right here. So if you ever air up your gun and it's leaking from here, it's the only time that you really want to remove these Phillips head screws. Chances are you guys are going to be using the wrong Phillips head or whatever. I can only imagine that if you try to take that out just to service it, or very often, those Phillips head screws are going to be wearing out. So it's not really necessary to get underneath there. Only get in there if it's actually leaking. Go ahead and reinstall your bolt, and you're done. Programming the stock Insight NG board is actually pretty straightforward. Start off by compressing the trigger and pressing the power button, and you'll see a text right here. In our case, in our model that we have, it actually says Frenzy 5.1. That's the version of the board or firmware. So as this video gets dated, this text may change. It could be Grizzly 7.0 or something, whatever Bob wants to name it. So decompress the trigger, and now you're into the programming. It starts off with firing mode, rate of fire, game timer, debounce, mechanical debounce, trigger filter, dwell, the caliber, bolt delay, and hand text, and then the factory reset. So starting off with the firing mode, we actually still have it set in full auto capped for our during our efficiency test. Made it really easy. So in this case, I'm going to set it back to semi-auto capped. You'd press the power button, the text would say set. Now you can cycle through all the firing modes, and I'll read them off for you. Looks like we got PSP 3-shot capped, PSP 3 ramp capped, Millennium ramp capped, semi-auto uncapped, and semi-auto capped. That's where I want to be. So if this is a selection that I wanted, and just to show you an example, if I were to miss this for whatever reason, in order to go back to it, you just keep on pulling the trigger. It'll cycle back around to the actual selection you want. And in order to keep it, you would press the power button, and bam, now we're on semi-auto capped. Pretty straightforward. So if you wanted to change your rate of fire cap, you would press this black button, and you could actually change the parameters. And say if you missed 12.5, you would just hold the trigger down. It would go through its entire BPS range, which is 1 BPS to 30.5 BPS. So now we're back at 1. Keep holding it forever. Now we're 12.5. That's what I wanted. Press the button, and bam, it's saved. So you got the game timer, which can range from 1 minute to 90 minutes. Debounce, which stock is 2 milliseconds, and that ranges from 1 millisecond to 15 milliseconds in 1 millisecond increments. And then after 15 milliseconds, it goes all the way up to 50 milliseconds in 5 millisecond increments. Mechanical debounce, default is 3. It goes from 0 milliseconds to 5 milliseconds in 1 millisecond increments. Trigger filter, default is 6 milliseconds. It goes from 1 to 50 in one increment. Now, the dwell. Everyone messes with this, right? Everyone's always going to mess with this. If you reset your factory, or with our current model, if you reset it to factory, your dwell is going to be at 6 milliseconds, which is actually a bit low from what Bob Long actually found. The guys over at Bob Long, what they have found works for the gun the best. So they recommend actually bumping it up to 9 milliseconds or higher if you're going to start off with using this gun. Of course, if you go higher, the shot's going to be a little bit softer, but you're also going to be wasting more air. So that's up to you. You can always mess with this stuff, and I know you guys will. But just know that, if you reset it to factory, it's going to be at 6 milliseconds with our current model, with this current firmware. But they recommend that you start off at 9 milliseconds or higher. So the dwell goes from 1 millisecond to 16 milliseconds. And the paint caliber, now this is something that I talked to Zach over at Bob Long. He said that they're planning on coming out with one of these kits, a 50 caliber kit. So Splatmaster, something like that, any type of 50 caliber paintball, they're hoping to come out with a kit that you can drop right in, same way by removing the bolt engine, dropping in a 50 cal kit, and you can go play with Splatmasters, Splatmaster ammo. So that's something to look forward to. It'd be pretty neat. Bolt delay goes from 1 millisecond to 25 millisecond. It's basically the ball in place, parameter. So it's a delay when the ball actually goes into the breech, that the ball waits for it to settle, and then it shoots. And this is actually pretty neat. Right-hand text, if you are a lefty, bam, hit the set button again, now it reads out for your left hand. It's pretty cool. They're starting to, it's cool to see that a manufacturer is actually thinking about people that think with the opposite side of the brain. So, in factory reset, for whatever reason, if you were messing with your gun, didn't know what you did wrong, and the gun's not working because you're messing around on your couch, fooling around with it, you can always reset at the factory. Just keep in mind that with the dwell, it's got to be 9 or higher. Hopefully, they'll actually update the firmware at the time of this video to where it's actually, when they reset the factory, it'll be 9 or higher and not 6. But that concludes and right back here at the semi-auto, that concludes our programming mode, or programming instructions. In order to get out of programming mode, you press the power button, it'll power off, power it back on without the trigger compressed, and you're ready to go. If you've owned an electronic gun before, this is going to be very familiar for you. But if you haven't, in order to remove the grip frame and the solenoid, you're going to want to start off by removing the right side grip frame, so this side, or the right side grips, I'm sorry, with the 3 screws. Now, this isn't entirely necessary because most of the gun is, besides the regulator and the bolt engine, you really don't need to get inside here unless you're changing your battery. So right here, this is what's underneath the grip. So go ahead and remove the eye wires and the solenoid connectors, or the eye wire and solenoid connector. Now, refer back to the trigger removal earlier in the video, because if you leave the trigger in and you try to separate the grip frame and the body, well, that's going to be a problem, because the grip frame, or the trigger, is actually bolted into the grip frame, and the spring is butted up to the plate where the solenoid is screwed into, attached to the body. So when you go to pull those apart, the spring wants to go this way, trigger frame and the trigger wants to go that way, and that spring is going to go like this and fly across the room somewhere, Hopefully it stays inside the gun or falls down in the trigger frame. But just go ahead and remove the trigger. And if you didn't see it earlier in the video, you remove the screw, tilt the trigger, and you can see, and you can probably hear that the trigger or the spring is catching on the micro switch. But there you go. All right, now that you got your trigger out, grab your Allen keys, your 1/8 Allen key, remove the front screw, and the rear one. The rear one is captive, so the reason why I have the gun pointed up like this, or upside down, is because in order to actually remove this, the grip frame will rise, like so. Now, as soon as that's out, carefully slide the two apart and make sure that the wires don't get snagged. If they do, they could get caught and you could break a connector. All right, so here is your solenoid manifold, solenoid, and the body. Now, you're going to want to take your 5/32 Allen key. There's really no reason to remove this. It's not entirely necessary, but just in case you wanted to, or if one of the gaskets underneath the manifold were to start leaking, you need to grease it up. This is how you do it. Now, this screw is held in by blue Loctite, so it will be harder to do than I just showed you. I've actually taken this apart already. Now there's the entire manifold and screw and solenoid. Now you really don't need to take this apart. There's really no reason to take it apart, actually, and they don't recommend that you do it, so don't. But just in case you have to get into this gasket right here, there's a couple O-rings right here that need to be greased, and there's a gasket right here as well that also need to be greased. Now, if you wanted to put this back in, make sure that the eye wires are down inside this groove and they come out to the right here. Drop that down in place. Make sure the eye wires are actually coming out right here in the opening. Make sure they don't get pinched. Grab your Allen key. You can re-Loctite this if you wish. Actually, it's probably a good idea to re-Loctite it, but for the sake of the video, I'm just going to snug it back up. Grab your grip frame. Feed the wires through the grip frame. Okay. Feed everything through. Make sure nothing's getting snagged. And if your rear grip frame screw fell out like mine, now's the time to put it back in. Slides in. I like to turn mine upside down. Tighten this back down. Same thing with your front grip screw. Pretty straightforward stuff. It's not rocket science. Say if you got shot and there's a whole bunch of paint underneath there, you want to clean it out. Or if you're like me and you want to make sure every single inch of the gun's clean, you can do this. Make sure that your eye wires are plugged back in. Along with your solenoid wires. Make sure it's nice and tucked away. It's not going to get pinched or anything. Close back up the grip. And again, same thing with the trigger section of this video. Leave the front grip frame screw out, or grip screw out. I'll show you why to do that in a second here. Because when you put the trigger back in, if you leave the front grip screw out, you can actually take an Allen key and make sure that the spring is not getting caught on the micro switch. So again, start with the bearing point. Or actually, get the spring in first, and the bearing, and the rest of the trigger. Drop the pin in place, like so. Tighten that down. Flip it over. Take your Allen key. There we go. Now it's off the micro switch. Take your grip frame screw, or grip screw, sorry. Grip frame is on my mind. Tighten that down, and there you go. You're all set. That concludes our online manual for the Insight NG. For at any point in time, if I lost you, or if you have questions, or if you just can't figure out your gun, you can email us at support@hustlepaintball.com or contact Bob Long directly. If you haven't noticed, this white piece of paper right here is actually the bolt engine schematic with all of the O-ring sizes. You can go find that schematic at Bob Long's website. On the very front page, if you right-click the picture, you can save the picture or you can print it. So be sure to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, read our blog, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and of course, come join us at PB Riot. We'll be talking about the Insight NG and anything else paintball related. Until then, guys, I will see you later.
Access grease?
Access grease?
Excess?
Axis? Did I say axis? Oh, shit. What is this, German grease?